Damn it. There we go. Hello. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am your host and comrade, Rob. And a few of you may remember Brandon from back in the early days. He was helping out when a winter storm struck Texas. Yeah.
How's it going,
that's
everybody?
what I got.
Yeah, how's it going? That interview, I was there representing Cooperation Denton at the time, our little North Texas cool anarchist group, that somehow managed to rake in the Democrat Party's donations on behalf of the darling AOC, and like tapping all of the local charities to try to get people to fundraise for them. So, I think all that money went to people finding housing and just kind of helping out for the project. So it was kind of wild that a bunch of scrappy people who just wanted to do community gardening and have a tool shed that we all used in common were like, what do we do with all of this money?
Yeah, I can imagine. Generally, most organizations on the left are not well funded.
Not strapped. No, we're not strapped at all.
That's one of those situations where it's not a bad problem to have, especially in a situation like that. There was, I don't know how many people you guys personally helped, but
I know that the actual freeze conditions themselves, I think in total we mostly served the houseless population in Denton because the shelters were not operating on 24-hour basis at the time, or rather the city wasn't providing 24-hour shelter in place for people. They were kicking them out at night. So we were people are gonna die. So we snap raised probably $5,000 overnight almost, and we just started scooping people up off the street and just getting them into hotels, getting them places to stay. And of course, the hotels jacked up the prices to unreasonable levels for the quality that these people were getting, but anything was better than staying outside. So I think between 26 and 32 people we got off the street, and then we got people we put together a crew to get them food, to get them toiletries, to get them in whatever we had. And so we got a very surprisingly overnight organized system. We had dispatch, we had drivers, we had transport, we had everything set up to kind of work as a network, which I think once the freeze kind of ended and things come back to normal, it's a little bit harder to get people to feel the pressure of helping out in that kind of way, which I think a lot of left-wing orgs sort of suffer with, is the kind of attrition that you feel in volunteering your time while also working full-time, while everybody else is working full-time, sometimes more than full-time, sometimes 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And I think that labor component being absent for a lot of people is why it's hard to kind of mobilize in the grassroots form. It's doable, it's possible, but that that initial jump from like, I'm going to go from like keeping to myself to working with people in my neighborhood or my community to get something done is like, it requires a lot of need, I guess, a lot of like a pressing need, you know. So
Right.
we're not all,
well, and a work stoppage probably helped as well.
Yes, that was big. Having people who just weren't going to work and who wanted to help, like that. I mean, that's kind of like why I feel like so many organizations, volunteer base, is made up of people who are retired, because like they now have all the time to actually do the things that they wanted to do or to feel like they're helping in some way. So,
right.
if someone asked me like, "What are you gonna do when you retire?" I'd be like, "Volunteer, probably, like all the time." Because
yeah, right.
what am I just gonna watch TV all day long? Like, come on, dude. Like, so. But yeah, so that is I guess that would be a cool transition in talking a little bit about the org that I currently work for or work with, ICNA Relief. ICNA stands for Islamic Circle of North America, and they are a relief aid organization. I would call them like a religious relief aid organization because it is run by Muslims, but the people that they help is everybody, right? It's like sort of like most faith-based organizations. The main purpose of ICNA Relief is to provide financial, medical, rental assistance, disaster relief, transitional housing for people who are just on hard times. So as far as charities go, I think they do a pretty good job. Our overhead, like our administrative costs, are 3% of our budget. Almost all of it goes towards the programs. So the largest being the community assistance portion, the food pantries, the free medical clinics, women's shelters, and then we also provide transitional housing for people transitioning out of prison, or women who are escaping marriages where there's domestic abuse, or just anybody who like is trying to kind of get back on their feet and kind of finds themselves choosing between homelessness and basically jail. So that's probably the second largest program we have. The last one is the disaster relief program, where during major disasters, we basically just pack everything together, food, water, clothing, medical supplies. I'm in charge of the medical van, the mobile clinic down here in the South Central region. So this last hurricane that came through Louisiana, we were there on the ground for the ICNA Relief as an organization was there on the ground for about 2 weeks. And I was there for probably a total of 5 days or so. So a lot of that was kind of taking the supplies to places that were hit pretty hard. We were in touch with local organizers who basically would just tell us, like, we need stuff here, we need stuff here. And it's kind of astounding to see how many people would just come because they wanted to help. Most of our staff is on a volunteer basis. So I'd say 90% of the people that were there were not paid by the organization. They were just volunteering to be there. And some of them were there for the whole 2 weeks. They just got up and just went. But I'm not speaking on behalf of ICNA Relief or anything like that. This is just me. Just kind of, I admire the work they do. I think that they're kind of approaching like this whole idea of a relief organization from the right place, because most of the money does not go to their own pockets. It doesn't go to kind of feed this huge machine that requires the existence of pain and suffering in order to continue existing, or as an excuse to just keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger. So I enjoy the work they do, but of course, like somebody who's approaching the topic from a left-wing perspective, obviously, like what they are doing is only taking the concept of mutual aid and sort of expanding on it, like and kind of outsourcing it to a nationwide like position, right? It's like we need donations from people across the country, sometimes multiple countries, to fund programs that help people who are in need. And it's just at the same time, it's like the people themselves could also help themselves, but this economic system also creates the conditions where the poor and the people who need that kind of assistance don't have what they feel like is the time or the resources to really get together, especially because like we don't really have any class consciousness either. So the concept of kind of like aligning ourselves as workers, and identifying like how we can address certain issues is still like not on the at the forefront of our minds, right? We have no like shared identity, you know, because I think about
Right.
like in Chiapas, right, with the Zapatistas, right? It's like they had the identity of being like indigenous and being farm workers, and also simultaneously being exploited by the state and by foreign corporations. It's like they had sort of something to kind of rally around, and it took 10 years to really build that movement. But when it started, like you couldn't end it.
Yeah.
Here, like I can't imagine my town of people, all the working class people, like kind of getting together and unifying in that kind of way, right? Or under that kind of banner. So that's charities kind of like act as this almost like a middleman between the people who want to help, who want to donate in some way, either their time or their money, rich and poor alike, and acts as like a way of like directing it towards people who need it, but it's done in such a scattershot way, like most most national charities, where it's just like somebody in like New York can donate money, and it's helping somebody in like Oklahoma, you know. And while there are probably people in New York who need that kind of help, right? So,
Right.
but I mean, that's just kind of like my eagle eye view or my eagle eye look at that whole situation.
So, like, how does your experience there like make you a better leftist? Like, what have you learned that you can bring back to the table? You know, doing mutual aid and things like that. I mean, for starters, how do they like? Are if most of the organization is volunteer based, I would assume that means the medical staff as well. Like, how do they find doctors and nurses willing to do this for free, and how can we find doctors and nurses willing to do this for free?
A big chunk of our medical volunteers come from a partner organization called OPNA, which is the I always get the name wrong. Hang on, I'm just gonna look it up so I don't butcher it.
That's fair. That's fair. I
Yeah,
appreciate that actually.
yeah, the Association of Physicians of Pakistani Descent of North America. So basically, these are people who are either Pakistani or they are Pakistani origin or descent, who are also medically trained. So the advantage of having doctors in this org, and then the fact that it's a nationwide organization, is because that when you travel to a different state, you have to have local physicians in order to administer medical care. You can't bring in somebody from Texas to start giving out medicine and medical treatment in Louisiana. So we every time we leave the state, we tap doctors who are volunteers for OPNA, and they come out and they work with us for free for 2, 3, 4 hours doing medical relief. And we try to like spread out the volunteer basis. We don't want to like pull the same people too often. Like I myself, like asked my physician here, I was like, would you ever be interested in like doing volunteer work for this organization if we ever come to Denton? And he was like, I work at the hospital on the weekends and I work at the clinic Monday through Friday, so I don't really have time. And I was like, oh snap. So, but as far as how do you find, I guess, how would you find someone to work for free or do it for free? It's like for us working as a Muslim organization, we have a very strong, like, I guess, like faith-based backbone, right? The concept that like you always have to make space and time for people who don't have what you have. So a lot of these doctors are usually like, they're very nice, but also very religious. So they feel like it's kind of their duty to do this. It's like their duty to like provide affordable or free healthcare at point of service. Especially if you're coming from a country like Pakistan, where like that's more common to find doctors who will do free medical care, because the difference in class is very stark there. Whereas like here, it's more of a sliding scale. You can have somebody who's working class and lower income, but looks or can present as more like secure financially. Like you don't have somebody living literally like in a neighborhood. It's like basically a shanty town, right? Like that's not something you're going to find here very much. But that's something that you'll see there way more often. Or something at least akin to a shanty town. So we have a large medical corps that basically like exists to provide these services. And if you have like a negative relief like clinic nearby, then you can get free medical care from there anytime. Like we have one in Plano, and it's busy every weekend. It's open. Like we never have a day where we're not seeing patients. And some people
have one in Phoenix.
I don't know. We might. But it's that I think like for a lot of the people who volunteer or do work for us, like especially if they're secure and they come with us and they see kind of the people who are coming to get free healthcare, free services, they will like ask me like, well, what happens if they need, this particular kind of medication or this kind of like, treatment? And I'm like, it's like they see us or they die. Like that's kind of how this country works, right? It's like, that's kind of how we operate as a society.
Right.
And I have the feeling that like if we passed, universal healthcare tomorrow, like ICNA would be more than happy to like say our work is done here, boys. Like we can finally just like move on to other things. Like because I think that aspect of the job is like one of the most, I guess, sobering parts of it, because like you see kind of like how much it means to people who don't normally have access to like blood pressure medication or diabetes medication, or who have like a major like pain or something that's going on with them and they have not had it checked out in years. And it's like you show up and you're like, yeah, free medical treatment for 3 hours at this location. And someone is like scrambling to get there, right, to see a doctor. And it's like that's the first person they've spoken to in years, right? The first doctor they've spoken to in years, because they just could not afford the $150, $200 to talk to one,
Right.
So,
right.
But I think probably the most important lesson from disaster relief is probably like just seeing how like if you apply pressure on society, at least like at the lower levels, at the working class levels, if you apply any sort of pressure, whether it's like a natural disaster or something that is out of the ordinary, people are very quick to sort of rally together and pool their resources and their time to help each other. And I saw that when I went to Jean Lafitte, which was one of the hardest hit areas by the hurricane. On the first weekend we were there, it was an absolute mess. It was like people's entire homes were underwater for the duration of that thing. So like all their stuff, their furniture, their whole houses were on their front lawns, just stripped out.
Wow.
So everything they own is gone. Like stuff is leveled or it's still flooded. It was a total mess. But once we came back that second weekend, when people had heard about it and they knew, they'd seen the pictures and the videos, not just from us, but from everybody. I mean, everybody was talking about Jean Lafitte. Like at almost every 100 feet or so, there was another relief organization or group of people giving away something, giving away free food, free clothing, free this, free that. And it's just like when we got there the second time, we were like, do we even need to be here? Like, there's like, you guys have miles of people here to help. And it's just like, because they saw that it had to be done. They saw it needed to be done. And they just came, they showed up. So, I mean, that's kind of the impressive aspect of it, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can only imagine how sobering it was. I mean, like, that was Hurricane Ida, right? Yeah, I thought so. We talked about it quite a bit on the show, and like, we played several videos, but like the whole time, all I'm thinking is like, video never does something like this justice. You know, like it's easy to sit here behind a screen and be like, wow, that's insane. But like being there and actually seeing the damage, I'm sure was sobering in itself.
Yeah, you sort of like are very comfortable with kind of like things always being in their place, like society, everything is very clean. It's very like, people will have like, you'll see a messy house and be like, oh wow, that guy's front yard is like trash. But like to kind of like see everything look like that, like all the buildings, all the homes, like down power lines, destroyed signs, like boarded up windows, roofs that had been replaced with tarp because the roof was destroyed. Uh, it's kind of wild. Like you're driving through it. Oh, and also like just no power. Like there's no power anywhere.
Right.
There's no gasoline anywhere. So like once you got into New Orleans, there was no gas, just like anywhere. Like the idea, I think, for some people of like going to a petrol station and not being able to fill up their tank, like probably for an hour from New Orleans and then outward, there was just no fuel. So the van, we had to pick up 3 gas cans before we left Texas, fill them up in Texas. So we had about 15 gallons of fuel in gasoline canisters. And we always had it on the bus in case we like couldn't find a gas station to fill up, right? Like we were staying at the time in Baton Rouge and then driving about an hour and a half to get into New Orleans every day. And so thankfully in Baton Rouge, there was gas, there was power. At least there was power on the western half of Baton Rouge. So that was okay. We were sleeping at the local masjid and sleeping on air mattresses. And I was there with probably about a dozen other guys. And we would like get up in the morning at probably about 7 and then go into town and then work all day and then come back, eat, like chill, rest, and then get back to it like the next day. And it was just kind of like clockwork, like that.
Right. That's awesome though. I mean, I'm sure there was so many people that were trying to do it, but the fact that you actually had like an outlet to go there and help, I think is great regardless. And did your experience with Cooperation Denton, like, I don't know, maybe prepare you in any way for what you were doing there with Hurricane Ida?
Yeah, I think working with Cooperation Denton, it's like you kind of get the sense of like the front facing aspect of disaster relief, the fact that like a lot of it is just person to person, right? Like you're dealing with the public, right. You're dealing with people who have lost everything, or who are like have very short nerves, and you're there to help. It's just like you're there to do the right thing, but like people are still people, and if they're having a very hard time, then that's going to show in their interaction with you. And it's like, and for us, like working with houseless populations, people who might have like, something going on in their lives where it's just like they kind of act outside of like the normal social, like dynamic, then like you sort of like leave yourself open to like kind of anything, right? Any kind of interaction. And so if you're seeing, like 20, 30, 40, 50 people at a medical camp, every hour, every 2 hours, then you're going to get kind of all kinds of interactions, especially if you're trying to like have everybody follow standard procedure. And it's like, to them, this feels very out of the ordinary. So they don't want to like, do the standard procedure. They're just sort of like, can I just talk to the doctor? It's just like, no, we got to check you in, we got to take your blood pressure, we got to take your glucose
Right.
and your cholesterol and everything. So it's, it can feel very like, I don't know, like there's like that tension where they feel like you're coming in from outside, you don't know what it's like, etc. So I think some of that helps play a role. Also, the importance of like being able to find energy where you feel like you have none. When the chips are kind of down on the table, whenever it's like time to go, when it's time to work, and it's time to like, get your shit and then get it to the location, unpack it, like get ready to like start working. You might think like, the day before, you're like, oh, I don't even know how I'm gonna have the energy for tomorrow. Like it's gonna be like so exhausting. Oh, and it was hot too. It was so hot, and it was so.
I bet.
Yeah,
I'm actually really surprised that there wasn't more like heat-related injuries and deaths than what was talked about in the media anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
because
like,
I remember when the hurricane was blowing in, they were already saying like, "Hey, so this is gonna hit, and then it's gonna be like 95 fucking degrees tomorrow." Like.
Yeah, no, the humidity was the worst. I think it was like 100%.
I bet.
So my first day or my first weekend I was there, I didn't really have any like breathable like working clothes on. Like I had like my jeans and like t-shirts and stuff like that. So I was very like ill prepared. Oh, hey, Trisha's here.
Hi.
Hey,
Sorry,
how's it
late. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm pretty good. Happy
Good
Sunday
to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
I apologize for my tardiness. It's been the struggle of the juggle tonight. We were having technical issues earlier that put us behind. So I'm glad I finally got to pop in here and take part in this conversation.
I'm glad too. Yeah, I guess good to have you.
Thank you.
So yeah, we were just talking about the conditions in Louisiana when I was there, but I think we've probably exhausted. It was hot, it was tiring, and we, but I think with anything mutual aid related or like related to dealing with helping people, it's like you sort of find the energy that you need when it might not be there at all. And so when that kind of like that reservoir just kind of made me think, it's like, is this how people got all the way from like where we were to, quarter million years ago to like now? It's just that reserve that existed, like somewhere deep in the human body.
It probably is.
But yeah, so Denton really kind of facilitates for me, I guess, like as a kind of an outlet for that. But I think what this makes me think more about outside of ICNA Relief as an organization is like how we can translate that into like taking that model and saying like, okay, how do we give this to the people in a way where it's just like you can do this exact same thing. You don't need like an organization, a 501c3, anything like that, in order to like change and reshape your communities to work for you and to sort of build that dual power base separate from capitalism. And I was thinking about that when I was walking back to my apartment with my wife, and we were just like looking at like the space, like where they were doing some new development or something. And there were like all these houses, all these apartments. And my wife is like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could just like put in like a community like farm like right here in this space? And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool, but like in order to make that work, everybody who uses it all has to pitch in and help, maintain it, run it, water it, plant it, harvest it, weed it. And I was like, have you ever tried to get people together to do that? Like, it's like you get that initial burst of like 10, 15 people are like, yeah, man, we're going to grow some plants, bro. And then like after like 2 months, like you're down to like the 3 people that are like, doing all of the work. And then everybody else is just swinging by to like grab the butternut squash, before it's ready. And so, and then I kept thinking about like how how this economic system sort of trains everybody to like kind of just think about themselves, or like think about like what's going on like inside their house or like at their job, but not really what's going on around them, right? Like it's like who even lives next door, right? It's just like who lives on the floor above you, right? Who lives in the house next to you? Like that was something that I didn't really think about, like who are my neighbors? Probably until I started diving a little deeper into left-wing, like I guess theory was sort of like the idea of collective action, and it's just like how do you act collectively as a community if you don't know the other members of the collective, right? So I sort of made it a point to like, you know what, I'm going to meet the other people who live in my apartment, and during the freeze, that was super helpful because we all had something that somebody else needed in that time. And like the guy right next to me, he had like a butane stovetop, and it was just like, you know, now I can cook food. And if I had not just been like, hey, what's up, man? Like, you want to hang out? Then I never would have had access to that kind of technology, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an important thing anyway. Like you said, when something like that happens, it's going to be people that are right there that want to help. And, you know, like maybe somebody's got a heater and somebody's got warm clothing and somebody's got a fucking shovel. You know, like, I mean, you got to start somewhere. I guess, actually, like, how much snowfall did you guys get? Was it like enough to inhibit movement at all, other than driving?
Oh, no.
Or
No. It wasn't like Michigan snow or anything where it's just like several feet of snow, you know, like
right.
it was mostly just the fact that like the infrastructure is not designed for that temperature, like that level of freezing. Right. So, I mean, like the power grid literally just froze.
Yeah.
And so the guy that I was talking about who lived next door to me, he was also he worked as a he basically bought energy from the grid for CoServe, which is a cooperative power company. And so he had more information about like the condition of the power plants at the time. And he was saying that like even like the natural gas and coal plants, like a portion of them, like a portion of that percentage, like probably about a quarter of them were like freezing. They were just like, they would freeze and they wouldn't start. Like, so everyone was like talking about like, oh, the wind turbines froze, man. Like this is the future of like the Green New Deal. Like this is all renewable energy. And it's just like, bro, like the natural gas and coal plants froze. Like that is how cold it was. And that is how bad it was. Like that was more of our energy grid going offline than like the 10% that's run with renewables. So like, you know, cut me some slack.
Right. Yeah. Not to mention being in that climate, they didn't anticipate needing to do de-icing measures like we do up here on our windmills in order to keep them functional in the winter. They were not prepared for that down there because who the fuck would think it would snow there?
Well, actually, the funny thing about that is that in 2010, when I was living in this exact same town, we had what was called Ice Apocalypse. And Ice Apocalypse was like what happened in February, but like half as bad. Like it was mostly East Texas, or like North and Northeast Texas that were frozen over. And so they did a full survey of the entire Texas grid in 2010. So this is 11 years ago. And they were like, your grid is at risk of freezing. Basically, they're like, you have not winterized the grid. You need to winterize the grid. They found that out, you know, 10 years before the actual event. The problem is that the grid is privately owned. And so like de-icing and winterizing measures for the grid means spending money that you otherwise just don't get back, right? It's just like, to these guys, that's just a cost, right? That doesn't benefit them in terms of revenue in any way. And so that's sort of like why having utilities in the people's hands makes way more sense than having it in private hands. Because if it's the people, it has to get done, just fucking do it. Just winterize the grid. To these guys, they're like, oh, it's going to cost $200 million. That's just money that I'm not going to get back. I'm not going to do that. So,
well, that level of greed is just so fucking disgusting too, because they're more worried about, keeping their profit margin intact than making sure that it's even able to handle inclement weather like that. And look at how much it hurts them and all of their customers not have those basic precautions in place. It's ridiculous.
It's very similar to like companies that like strip back their IT department because like to them that's just a cost. And then like when they have a huge data breach or like a hack or something, it's like they spend way more money trying to like build those systems from scratch again or trying to plug those holes when you could have just paid, like an IT security team to manage your shit for you. But they don't, it's all reactive, right? All these measures are reactive because anything that's preventative costs money. And so they think that if everything is working as intended, that, we just don't need it anymore, right? It's like our whole healthcare system. It's like we could prevent a lot of emergency care if we just like provided some kind of preventative service, at the point of sale. Yeah. But it's like, we don't want to do that. We don't want to spend that money. So like, why would we, right?
Without looking at the fact that it actually saves money in the long run. And it's like,
right. It's like homeless.
Look at the numbers.
Same concept, right? It's cheaper to house homeless people and give them treatment than it is to police them and make it illegal to be homeless.
Right.
But it's just
Isn't that a ridiculous concept? Every time I hear it, I'm like, how the fuck do you criminalize homelessness?
Right. It's illegal to...
Like, that's your fucking solution,
Yeah.
That doesn't solve it. That doesn't help any fucking buddy.
Right.
Well, it helps the private prison companies.
Yeah. And I think the main sticking point for people when I tell them, like, we should just give homeless people homes is that initial reaction of like, well, I have to pay for my home, so why should somebody else get it? And you're just like, so you're telling me that like the reason why a person should not be housed is because you personally feel like they didn't deserve to get that home. And it's like, even if like it's saving you tax dollars in the long run, that's still not a good enough solution for you. You can have a very selfish reason for wanting to give the homeless homes, but it's that sort of mentality of like someone getting something that they didn't earn, didn't work for. When the concept is like, if you provide that assistance, that person can now live a much more healthy and productive life in the long run. It's like, that's good for you and that's good for society. Why wouldn't you do it? Right? Doesn't have to be altruism all the way down. Sometimes you can be like, make a very selfish case for wanting to help society as a whole. And it's like, I think like that's kind of like how conservatives might process that information. Like if you just give it to them, like, this is good for you, bro. It's good for you too. Like they have to think
literally
like,
more cost effective.
Yeah. So you're right, it is good for me. Okay, it will save me money. I don't know how we got here. I don't know how we got on this topic.
I don't either, but I mean, it's cool. It's cool.
Right.
Yeah, we're vibing. We're vibing.
Right.
I'm noticing, like, since I was on your show last time, dude, it's just like I look like I've lost weight, which is like it's a relief. I mean, like,
well, I mean, you're working 2 jobs, you're busy as shit. You probably have lost weight.
Yeah, I mean, when I went to Pakistan in May, like when I got back, I was like 236, and like since I've been trying to like, okay, my cholesterol's high, I gotta lower that. It's like I got down to like 214, and it's just like seeing myself in a video, I'm just like, oh yeah, no, I can see it. I can see it
going.
Right. I was actually gonna like ask you that, but I try not to, because sometimes it's like somebody's losing a bunch of weight that they don't want to lose, and then they're
Right.
upset about it.
It's like asking if somebody's pregnant, right? It's just like, just don't.
Right.
Let them volunteer that information. You're like, are you doing something with your hair? Like,
it's one of those moments of just saying, you look healthy.
Hey, looking good.
Yeah, right.
And then you get hit with that, like, oh, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, actually. It was like, yeah, I can't see your pancreas, so I wasn't going to comment on the on the pancreatic cancer, but, you know, I guess it is what it is.
Right.
So what other I guess thoughts about like the role of charity under capitalism come to mind for the two? I know that both of you guys probably had some questions together as a group. So now that, we're all here.
Well, I was kind of just like wanting to hear your take on it largely, but and I asked questions as we went, I guess, a couple of them, but pretty much like I want to see like what you're doing happening on a grassroots level.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I wanted to focus my conversation on, was like, well, and that's why I asked, like, how do they get doctors? How could we get doctors?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that being said, in terms of the role of charities, I think we're all pretty much in agreement on that. But I am glad that you found an organization that, isn't just squandering people's money. At least their heart's in the right place. And that's really what matters, whether they're on the left or not. I wish they had class analysis, of course. But, you can only expect so much out of a charity organization. And I'm just glad that they're actually helping people instead of claiming to help people and just pocketing donation money.
Yeah. It's right. I checked out their financials are pretty transparent. Our information is on Charity Navigator. I think it's 94% of the funds go towards the thing that they're paying for, and we operate on very shoestring budget. So like what we can do with what we get is pretty remarkable. It doesn't go to us. But as far as like, how do you do this in your community? Like, how do you get this going in your community? It's like, I would not underestimate the kind of connection you can make with faith-based organizations. I think like, I wouldn't really say like a mega church, but like a local religious organization that like, where some of that money goes back into the community. Like I know that there's, at least in my town, we do have churches that do give the money sort of back to people, right? There is community assistance programs. And so like some of our volunteer base are local churches. We pull from those resources. But you can kind of draw on that sort of religious incentive to help, right? That's sort of like dutiful obligation, right? And like the thing with most projects, with most like, mutual aid projects is kind of like, you need labor. You just need people who are going to do the work, right? And the thing is like a lot of working class people are strapped for time. They just don't have the time or the energy to get started. But usually once you build something, like once you actually have something moving and going, people will just start coming in on their own volition. So we had a project in this town called I think it was the Denton Water Project or the Summer Water Project. And essentially what it was we had coolers that were chained to various like places in town, like parks, local businesses that would partner with us. Like basically it was a cooler that said free water, and people would volunteer to check on it every couple of days, refill it with water and ice, and just make sure it was always stocked. And the idea was that, people who live outside, people who are houseless, during one of like the hottest summers ever, it's just like would have water, would have something to drink. It'd be ice cold, and it would like always be available. And the number of people just volunteered to do this like out of the kindness of their hearts. It's like I think they only did it because it was already there, because there was already people who did it, who set it up, who got it started. And then when people kind of see something happening, they jump in because they're like, oh, this is like an established thing. I'm not going to have to like figure out how I fit into this or like what I have to do to get started. We have procedures, we have like stuff, like we have things to do. And so it's the same thing with Cooperation Denton. It's like we didn't get a lot of volunteers until we had a system in place to help people and to get resources and food and housing to the houseless. And it's like our volunteer numbers exploded after that happened. Like overnight, we went from like 10 people who would just like meet and talk about like, you know, book chin and like gardening and like, you know, democratic confederalism, to like 70 people who are like now all working on this like complex system of like keeping track of all these people and getting them food and getting them clothes, and then like following up with them after they got like out of their hotel stays. And so that's, I think, why ICNA Relief has such a huge volunteer base, is because like they've been around since the 60s. They've been doing this kind of thing for a very long time, and people know them, and they know that if they show up, they're going to have something for you to do. They're going to have something for you to help with. And they also know that if they donate resources to them, it's going to get used in the right way. And so that same level of like trust and interest at the local level has to come from local people having an idea and basically just investing in that idea with time, sometimes with money, but for the most part, the labor and the time is how you get it going. And I think that's why, you know, a lot of left-wing groups kind of fall apart, because everybody has cool ideas and they're like, oh man, wouldn't it be so awesome if we like did this thing? And like they talk about it and they think about it, but nobody ever goes and does the thing, right? They never just like get up and go do it. Or they'll say like, oh yeah, I was going to do it this week, but like I'm really busy this weekend. So like we'll do it next weekend. And then like that turns into like next month. And then that turns into like the next month, and that turns into never, right? So I think like just getting people together to do something is like the doing something is the critical portion. Like, you know, that old adage about like be the change you want to see in the world, right? And it's like that is to me more of a leftist expression than a right-wing one, right? The idea of just like, you know, oh, build the business that you want. It's just like, no, it's like change the issues you see in your community yourself. And if you do it, people will come help you, you know, especially if you're actually out there actively looking for help and you can show, oh, look at this. Look, we're doing the thing that I said I was going to do. And they're like, oh, sweet, I want in on that too. Ideas are hard to sell. Results are very easy to sell, on the other hand.
Precisely.
So I would definitely
like where they can see there's actually a spot where they can fulfill a role, get some actual work done, and see the product of that. And kind of makes me think of Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. And I think that's why, you know, a lot of people, when they donate money to like a religious institutions, because like that acts as a focal point for their community, right? If you think about a local church, instead of getting donations to pay for the church itself and the staffing, it's like that's only possible because they have drawn on the concept of like they are a community like focus point, right? It's like, I mean, there is the religious obligation attached to that, but like if it didn't exist, somebody would have to build it, right? And that's kind of like how I feel about like, you know, the mosques I go to. It's just like there are people who need a place like this, and so they get together and they build it. So why can't we do the same thing with stuff like communally owned housing or local gardens, or like local tool shares or time shares or anything like that? Like there's something called, I think, the time clock or the Denton, what is it? Time exchange. That's right. So it's not just for Denton. Everybody can do this if they want to. It's called the Time Bank. And essentially what it is it's an exchange of an hour of your time or somebody else's time for an hour of their time or your time. So the idea is that like people's time in this bank is equal, right? Everybody's worth an hour of their time, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a plumber, whether you're nobody. If you do an hour of something for somebody, you accrue basically an hour to request from anybody else. And so you just exchange labor and skills with one another, right? And so this time exchange is kind of like a way to sort of get the community kind of involved in like seeing who's around them and like what they can do. And if they need something, it's just like, okay, well now how can I contribute to the time bank to request the time from somebody else, right? It's like in order to get, you got to give, you know, and that's kind of how mutual aid works as a concept. It's just like you can't just keep getting. You do have to give something, right? And if it's not resources, then it's got to be your time, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
That's one of the things that I think is a beautiful comparison to highlight between how things operate collectively versus under capitalism, because whatever it is that you have to bring to the table is valued in a collective.
Correct. And I think that concept of just like we privatize the gains and collectivize the losses, right? It's just like I think you don't see that anywhere more than during disaster reliefs, right? Because like the government is very much like willing to like shell out the money that it needs for to like bring businesses back up to speed and to get people like their electricity and their power and everything. But it's like once it's shelled out all that money for like that sort of relief, now it's like, okay, now we're going to go back to business as usual, where people are now reaping the benefits of like an economy that's back to normal, you know, on the backs of like all that money that society has paid, you know, to take care of this problem.
Right. Ooh, something just happened with the audio.
Sorry, for some reason, like my throat is like I'm scratchy, so I'm coughing a lot.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe we lost connection or something. I didn't realize you muted your mic.
Yeah, when I cough, I try to mute it. So it's the digital version of covering my mouth, right?
Right. I had to do that a little while ago too.
I think get some water. Hang on, 1 second.
Absolutely.
Are you okay with carrot raisins, Howard?
Howard Pockets.
All right. Hydration, man.
Man, I drank so much water when I was in Louisiana. I think I'd go through like 6 bottles in one event because it was just so freaking hot.
Man. Excuse me. Now I'm coughing in the mic.
Your turn, huh?
Yeah. It just snuck up on me there real quick. Like, shit. Didn't even have time to mute the mic.
So Rob wants to talk.
Yes, individualism versus collectivism. So that's the thing. Okay, there's some positive aspects of individualism when it comes to exploring like your talents as an artist and musician, things that you can create to bring beauty to the world. But what we see here as far as individualism is the capitalistic fucking drive of I gotta get mine, no matter who the fuck I have to step on to get to it. And this is something we were discussing earlier with Zach too. Because that right there is a toxic frame of mind that we get ingrained with here from birth of that's what is perceived as success. Is have you exploited enough other people's labor to become a capitalist and oh, good job, you're fucking successful now. And that individualistic drive literally disconnects people from each other. It's part of that toxic shit where people are more concerned about themselves than about the welfare of anybody else. And that's something that seriously needs to be remedied in how people think and operate, because humans were never supposed to operate on those means. We were supposed to be collective. We're supposed to actually make sure that everybody is not just surviving but thriving. And that's not just a financial facet to have to deal with now. We're talking a mental, psychological, and emotional healing that needs to take place. That individualistic drive of me, that is what indigenous call wetico, the greed sickness. You're literally fucking ill if you think you need to exploit other people to just hoard whatever you can. There's something inherently wrong with that and broken in that line of thinking to even get to that point of thinking that's what you're supposed to do with this fucking life, instead of connecting with each other and actually caring, getting past your own apathy, your own fucking blinders, and giving a shit about other life around you. And that's something that we've been discussing quite a bit lately, because so many people are stuck on this individualistic path. It's like, okay, how do we steer you over here to understand why collectivism is so fucking important to our survival?
Right. I mean, it's literally how we got here. Think about if we were this self-centered, a quarter of a million years ago, where we would be today. And the answer is dead.
Right.
I think a really important distinction when we talk about individual or individualism is that to distinguish it from individuality, and because the notion of collectivism is not separate from individuality. It's like you are still an individual in a collectivist society, and in fact, it's our belief or it's our perspective that like you can actually explore more of yourself when you collectivize the concept of survival, like, and not make it your responsibility kind of thing. It's like you are more capable of kind of diving into yourself and into your relationships with others when you exist in a society where like that kind of pressure to survive is not only on your back, right? It's not
exactly
everybody's got everybody. And so because like art still exists in collective societies, like, music, literature, poetry, movies, these all existed in collective societies. The best Russian films were developed during the Soviet Union. Like whenever I was taking Russian coursework, our teacher was like, we're only going to watch like Mosfilm movies. Like we're going to watch like Soviet films because they were just better. They were better movies than the new stuff that's come out that's too much like Hollywood. She was like, it had more spirit, it had more soul, there was more to it. This idea of like
people were free to explore that.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, as a musician, I think about that all the time. If I didn't have to, well, I don't get me wrong, I would still be cooking, but I would like, be cooking because I wanted to, not because I had to survive. That's an important distinction to make. But the point is I wouldn't be slaving away in a kitchen for, 45, 50, 60 hours a week. I'd have a hell of a lot more time to play that electric drum set behind me or those guitars over there.
Right.
Exactly. And I mean, Marx talks a little bit about that too, when he talks about how you can, somebody with having that sort of independence from labor, and that is the fact that they would like choose what they wanted to do because that was what they wanted to do, not because of what they were boxed into doing. So I can't remember what that quote was. I know you guys probably know what it is. Where it's just like a man can like, I don't know, like hunt at this time and then fish in the afternoon and then like read. Like I can't remember what it was. I think Rob's looking it up.
I am looking it up.
Looks like it. But yeah, that's one of those things that speaks volumes, because literally living collectively does make more room for the positive aspects of individualism instead of all these toxic ones that we are driven to just to fucking get by and justify our existence. You know, like I would much rather be able to spend more of my time writing music and painting, things like that, you know. And I think a lot of other people would too. Look at how much more beauty would be created in the world. People were not stuck, enslaved to the system just to justify their existence.
Well, also the idea that like a lot of bullshit labor would just disappear, right? Because it's like we don't need people producing an excess of commodities, right, for sale. It's
Right.
like we basically produce what we need when we need it, and we don't go any further than that. Like we don't have to like strip the earth bare of materials to squeeze out
Right.
more money for people who own the shit that we're working on, right? It's just like this idea that like people keep feeding the dragon, hoping that like it's gonna innovate, it's gonna make the world a better place, and it's just like, no, motherfucker, it's like you can make the world a better place. You and the guys making that guy the money. It's like, come on, it's like you don't have to produce 1 million TVs per quarter, right? For like only what's gonna be like 60,000 customers, and the rest of that's gonna end up in a landfill somewhere. It's just like, don't you see the pointlessness of that, right?
And a big part of it is with this consumerist, we have companies intentionally making things to break down so that you fuel the economy by buying more replacements for it every couple of years. How about we start building shit to last again? And yeah, phones, computers, every form of technology, they're going out of their way to make sure that last year's model becomes obsolete this year so that you'll spend more fucking money. No, how about we make shit to last? And then people don't have to keep worrying about replacing shit. We buy it, it's good for, a decade. And be able to only produce what we actually need instead of this excessive shit that just results in more landfill waste, more destruction of the environment to keep mining more fucking lithium, for example, for these fucking, and I switch up what we're doing tech and go diving into things like hemp batteries that are more powerful, have greater energy storage anyways, and destroy the environment in order to create them. There's so much innovation that we can do to actually change things and step away from this consumerist ideal of the more you buy, the better person you are. Get the fuck out of here.
Right. So I found this quote finally. It's kind of a long one, but
that's okay. It's Marx. It can be lengthy and dry.
Yeah, right. For as soon as the distribution of labor comes into being, each man has a particular, exclusive sphere of activity, which is forced upon him and from which he cannot escape. He is a hunter, a fisherman, a herdsman, or a critic, and must remain so if he does not want to lose his means of livelihood. While in communist society, where nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, or to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, and criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming a hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. This fixation of social activity, this consolidation of what we ourselves produce into an objective power above us, growing out of our control, thwarting our expectations, bringing to naught our calculations, is one of the chief factors in historical development up till now.
That's the one I was thinking of. Yep.
Yeah. I love how, like, to make a point that most of us today would make in like 10 seconds. He takes like a whole ass paragraph.
That's a very German way of doing it, right? It's just like let's spread this out, you know.
Right.
Thorough, detailed, and specific. Yes. Concise.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was from the German ideology, anyways. So of course it was very German.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I feel like nowadays we're getting to the point where arriving at left-wing conclusions is more of a natural process, where it's just like you don't ever have to encounter theory at all in any context, or even like read cool things that leftists have said. It's just like you can just look at stuff and be like, man, is there a better way to do this? And then like kind of just reach the conclusions yourself. It's like, especially if you're watching like a lot of news coverage, especially lately about like the homelessness issue, right? Which is like a big topic now. But like, I think it's been a John Oliver sketch, or not a sketch, but a segment on his show. It's just kind of like, well, why don't we just give the people homes, right? Like, why don't we just like, do something that isn't just putting people in jail? And it's like the only answer to that is not what we're doing now.
Yeah.
It's basically criminalizing people for not being economically successful at either being exploited or being exploiters. Like, how do you criminalize people for being poor?
Right. And also the idea that of tying human value and human life to productivity, right? So like you are only worth what you can produce, or relative to what you do produce. Just like only being as valuable as if you could own a home or you can afford housing. It's like if you can or cannot do that thing, it's like, well, then you should just go do that thing. You should go, why don't they just get a home? Why don't they just rent an apartment? Why don't they just get a job? And it's just like, so you're saying that the only reason we would ever elevate somebody out of suffering, human suffering, is if they're willing to now sell their labor to somebody else, to pay somebody else for a roof over their heads, right? It's just like, I think I would just be homeless. Thanks.
That right there is why I live in a motorhome. Home is wherever I park it. I don't have to worry about a house note or rent. None of that. Like, as long as I have propane in there, I can cook. I can, turn on the heat, things like that, because it's literally become a point of unfeasible to be able to afford a fucking home unless you have multiple people working, multiple incomes coming in to even cover the cost of it. That's fucking ridiculous. Our parents' generation didn't deal with this when they were our age, because they could be bagging groceries at the corner store and be making enough money to afford a home, a vehicle, fucking
a college education, health insurance.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, with wages not having kept up with inflation and production, it's left so many people fucked by no doing of our own.
Yeah, how many crises of capitalism have we lived through? I mean, I'm 30 years old and COVID was like the third one? Like, once in a lifetime crisis, housing market crash, whatever you fucking want to call it this time. It's always a once in a lifetime event. But I've been through like 3 of those now. Stop selling me that shit.
Yeah, and I feel like for a lot of folks in our age bracket, either you got a career that like paid you enough to be able to afford a home about 5-6 years ago, or you're like a lot of my homies and you still cohabitate with other people in order to afford rent. And for a long time, that's what I was doing. I lived with 3 people in a 4-bedroom either house or whatever, and it's just like that was how I could afford to make rent and still have money left over, was dividing it up between 4 individuals, right? And so like your bills are less, your rent is less, like everything costs less when you live with other people. And it's just like people are like, well, why do millennials still have roommates, and just like, because they can't afford a fucking house, my dude. Like, that's what we would
because
love.
we
would love
figured out that living collectively is how we survive.
We would love to
and in
own
some cases
houses.
get
How about that?
Yeah, I would love to own a home.
It's like,
I would love to do all those things, but we can't. I mean, like, I tried before the housing crash. I tried in like in 2019 to apply for a loan to get a home, and they were like, "Yeah, you don't make enough money, bro." And I was like, "But the amount of money I would spend on my mortgage payment is less than my rent payment." And they're just like, "Well, we don't care. You still don't make enough money." So I was like, "I guess I'm not buying a home."
Right, dude. I hate the way all of that shit operates. You know, at one point I was looking at buying a home that was, you know, being sold dirt cheap because of the housing market crash. I mean, they were only asking $35,000 for this place, and I was approved. So I thought, until I got there. Thank you, dear. And when I went in to actually do the mortgage paperwork, I found out that just a couple days before, Verizon had decided to hit my credit report with some shit that I did not owe them, because I'd been out of contract and switched to a different carrier for over a year at that point. They hit my credit score and fucked me out of getting to buy a home. And at that point, I'm very blessed, lucky, whatever you want to call it, that a few of my friends were actually living collectively, and they were like, "Come stay here. You're not going to be out on your ass," you know? And it was one of those things, like, I am not easy to live with. I'll just put that one out there. Rob, you already know this. You put up with my ass.
Yeah, a time or two.
Yes, for extended periods of time. Thank you for that. But it's one of those things that really showed me how collective living can actually make it possible to not just survive but thrive. And, you know, it takes being in a situation like that with the people, for sure, for it to actually run smoothly, you know. But that's one of the things that really changed my perspective politically, is even understanding that, of like, holy shit, when we actually all make sure that all of our needs are met together, then we actually do really well, you know. It's one of those things that I think our generation has had to become rudely aware of, because of just how fucked this economy is and the situations that it's left us all in, where it's really difficult to find any aspect of living alone and surviving, you know. It's hard. If we don't fucking take care of each other, how are any of us going to get by?
And I think another thing that isn't talked enough about, or that we don't explore more, is the idea of socially owned living, right? Not even just cohabitation with other people, but also that the people who live in a particular area, like an apartment complex or a duplex or whatever, actually own the building, or actually socially own the building as a collective, right? So you can live on your own.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but basically the cost of...
You have your own personal private space.
Yeah, and the cost of rent is basically going to be just the cost of the maintaining the structure of the building. So I can't even imagine.
Well, yeah, and I mean, at that point, you might as well do, you know, all bills in.
Yeah.
And
right.
That's what I would do. That's what I would do. If we were a collective that owned the apartment, I would just have all the bills come to one address, split it between the units, and it's basically the cost of living at the apartment, or any repairs need to be done, whatever. You collectivize the living situation. And you're not doing it for profit, you're doing it for the costs. And it's just like that, to me, like, I think, like, to a child that would make a lot of sense, right? The idea of like having to teach somebody, like a child, like how profit works out in this equation. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, you've got this cost, and then you have this cost, and you have this cost, and then that's how much it costs to run it. So rent is this much. And they're like, well, why is the rent so much higher than the cost? And you're like, well, you see, because somebody took a risk with their existing capital, now we have to reward them in perpetuity, forever and ever for taking that risk. So that's why they deserve to be very wealthy, and why you don't. Don't you see? Like, we have a market, like.
It's like, fuck all of that.
Yeah.
Right.
I already feel like I gotta take a shower after that conversation.
Right. Feeling dirty over there.
No, just for like, oh my God, let's talk about how the free market works and the capital risk, and like why, Elon Musk is actually, it's not liquid though, bro. Like, he deserves the $200 billion that he's worth. Or something.
Whoa. So first of all, your numbers are a little low there. I actually just remembered when you brought his fucking name up that he surpassed yesterday, I believe it was, John D. Rockefeller is the richest person ever, right? Because if you take his almost $2 billion inflation from 1920 till now, that's about $340 billion is the most common number thrown out. And Elon Musk surpassed that, I believe it was yesterday.
Okay. Of course he did.
Yeah. So, are we living in the second Gilded Age? I mean...
It sounds
like
it.
Yes, actually, I'd say we're getting to that point where it's now so out in the open that I think that you can just look at it and be like, yep, corruption, absolutely at every level, everything is fucked, top to bottom. Actually, the best thing about the Gilded Age is that studying that topic in college is what made me a leftist. I was a Tea Party Republican when I went to college. I was raised by conservative parents, and I took a class called it was just American History from 1864 to 1929. It's a very, very small scope at everything, but you kind of see the effects of Reconstruction, the Gilded Age, the Great Depression beginning. And so we read a lot of very topical texts. And I think the one that really set me off was the book Death in the Haymarket, which was about the Haymarket riot and the police shootings and the wrongful convictions of the anarchists involved. And so reading that book, I was like, fuck capitalism, dude. This system sucks. So my parents have found me insufferable ever since then. So that was 2009, I think, 2010, and it's just been a roller coaster ever since then.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Absolutely.
I don't often talk about politics with my dad.
I don't either. But you know what? I actually feel like the last time I talked to him at Christmas time, I think the only reason why he actually entertained the idea of talking to me was about politics and listening and not just talking to me or at me was because I brought him something really nice from Pakistan. And so that was his Christmas present. So he actually sat and listened for a while. And I was like, I think what he expected me to say was something, about the government needs to do this and do that. But I was like, you know what, Dad? I was like, well, why don't we just, us in the community do the thing? It's why do we have to have somebody else do the thing? It's just couldn't we, I'm giving him that kind of very Rudolph Rocker, anarcho-syndicalist talk, but not with any of the jargon, just the ideas, And he's like, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, sure, I agree.
I mean, I love getting conservatives with communist shit too.
I know. If you don't call it that, then I mean, I feel like we just need to rebrand leftism in this country. I feel like we just need to take instead of progressivism or socialism or whatever, we should just call it I don't know. I think there was a streamer who had a segment where he called it super capitalism, where everybody owns the means of production collectively, so we're all capitalists.
Oh my god.
Okay.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dude, that would go over so well here. You might be
Yeah.
onto something.
They're like super
Right.
capital.
God, we could even get some libertarians on board with that one. Like,
Oh God.
you mean you found a form of voluntarism that you're willing to volunteer for? You fuck.
Yeah, I know. I feel like for libertarians, the cure is just showing them every like Sam Cedar call-in like clip, like just back to back. It's like it'd be like 1984 where he has his eyeballs like pulled open and he's just like watching like libertarians call into Sam Cedar and try to like convince him that libertarianism is a genuine ideology and is not batshit crazy. And then just watch him ask them questions like, so how do you enforce contract law anyway? He's like,
right.
It's like you're always building society for them like one brick at a time. You're like, okay, you sign a contract. Who ensures that contract is valid? It's like, well, you would need some kind of good. I would do it. And it's just like, okay, but he's got more people than you, so why would you ever sign that contract? It's like, well, there would be an enforcement agency of something. You're like, oh, so there's now an agency. Is it a government agency you're talking about? And it's just like, you just kind of put those societal building blocks together until you arrive at the state again. Like you're just going back to the states.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's funny how many things add up like that when you're reading through the wishes and wants of libertarians, and it's like, that sounds really fucking cute, unicorn fart glitter cupcake motherfucker. What like, how about we look at something realistic that'll actually be functional? Because you can wish in one hand and shit in the other. See which one fills up first. And of all the libertarians I've crossed paths with in my life, I've known two that were down to actually do the voluntary parts of, getting back to what libertarianism's roots actually were of libertarian socialism. They love to forget the socialism fucking part of it, except for a rare few. And it's like, you can't just have this sole individualism shit and no fucks to give for the other people around you. You can't. It will never work.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like even in leftist spaces, maybe we should make more room for spirituality, because like not necessarily religion, but I mean, like acknowledging that we are one, acknowledging that what happens to you happens to me.
Yes.
I mean, that's really what opens the door, right?
Yeah. Right. And
it really does.
Yeah, and I try to sort of, when I'm around, my like fellow Muslim homies, and I try to have conversations about politics, because most American Muslims like vote like Democrat. They don't vote conservative, right? For very good reasons, obviously, because the conservative party is just too fucking racist to vote for. Even if you're a conservative person of color, it's like the racism just turns you off. So like they're already more down for like those kinds of policies, but like I find it's very easy to kind of like tie in like religious beliefs or religious perspectives on humanity with left-wing perspectives, where it's just kind of like, don't those two things map onto each other much more neatly than capitalism and like things like Islam or Christianity? Like, that economic system didn't exist, first of all, and number two, it's just like the concept of the faith itself is like, we could do the thing that this text is mentioning if we all just pooled our resources, right? That's kind of the crux of it. And I feel like early Islam tried to address this by like the Quran mandates that you pay 2.5% of your total wealth, your net value, above a certain amount of money to the poor. Basically, it's just money for people who have less than you, and everybody has to do it. The whole society has to collectively donate the money. So, like somebody like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, it would be a 2.5%, like basically a tax on their entire net assets, right? So it's just like, that $340 billion, it's like, okay, we're taking 2.5% of that. You don't have a choice. You have to do the thing. And it has to go to the people who live on the lower rungs of society. And that seemed to work. Like that did seem to work for a little while. Obviously,
why wouldn't it?
Yeah, obviously material conditions change with time, but it's just like, if you look at that mandate, it's just kind of like, okay, how can you see that and then be like, yes, that, but also get rich, and like forget the people who you have to
also like become a landlord.
Yeah. Become a landlord. Own as much property as possible, eking people out of owning their own homes, and then charge those same people who want to buy a home, like increasing rent every year, like for the opportunity to live in your space that you do not take very good care
of. Careful, you're going to make yourself feel dirty again, even trying to express their.
I feel BlackRock already hitting my photo, just being like, "Hey, bro, can you look this advice?"
Right.
I don't know. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know how else to say this. I kind of feel like Mao was kind of on the right track with landlords.
I mean, yeah, it's so funny you said that, because literally, like, over dinner, my wife and I were talking about that, about Mao and landlords. She's like, yeah, he did some stuff I didn't agree with. She was like, but he was right on the landlords. And I was like, yeah, pretty base take on landlord, removal policy. So, right. I mean, it was kind of a it was a similar thing in Russia with the kulaks, right? Basically, like the landowners of the land itself, right? The people who owned the farmland, the rich families that owned the farmland. Stalin was just sort of like, all right, taking that shit, you can get the fuck out of here. Like, so, right. I mean,
no, I like that you handled it too. Like, oh, you own a plantation, now you don't. That's a public resource. Get the fuck off our island.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes when people are learning about leftist history or leftist revolutionary history, they get upset about the idea that, like, there are people that are either going to have to acquiesce to, like, the demands to surrender their resources for the people, or we're going to have to just take them from them, right? And you cannot leave these elements in place and have a people's revolution at the same time, right? You cannot say we're going to give everybody land, bread, and shelter, while people still commoditize and own those resources. And it's like, well, I can't believe that they just kicked people off of their property or executed them if they fought. And it's just like, what the fuck do you think, like, the state in that situation is doing? Are they acting on their own behalf or on the behalf of the people? It's just like, this is what you do to push capitalism out of the country. If you want to be a capitalist, don't do it here. And if you do it here, we're going to take your shit and you're going to kick you out. So,
right. Well, I mean, there's a Mao quote that actually, like, really sums up what you're saying here. A revolution is not a dinner party or writing an essay or painting a picture or doing embroidery. It cannot be so refined, so leisurely and gentle, so temperate, kind, courteous, restrained, and magnanimous. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. Nobody's just going to be like, yeah, dude, here's the keys to the mansion.
Yeah. And I think that the idea of, like, the peaceful transition to a left-wing state is such a weird pipe dream. It's like, why would you ever expect these people to give you the wealth that they hoard so, like, close to their chests, right? It's just like they spend so much to keep the riffraff out. Why would they ever, like, surrender it to you? Why would they not put those barriers in place politically or militaristically to keep you from doing that? It's like, what do you think, like, the rich have been doing since the Roosevelt era? Slowly eroding those social programs to the point where now they're ineffective, gone, like, deregulated. It's just like they will keep chipping away at those bricks until they're just completely out of their way. And so, like, the only way to stop the chipping is to stop the people who are doing the chipping. And you cannot coexist with capitalists. You just cannot do it. So,
especially in context to how they even view that personal property. And it's like, does everyone have the right to have a personal property of a home and place they can live, grow their own food, etc.? Yes. Do you deserve to get to keep enough fucking land that 20 to 100 other families live on and produce their food with? No. That is going too fucking far. That is hoarding of resources. That's also exploitation of labor for the people who you're hiring at a pittance to work that land. And fuck you for wanting to do that, you know? Like, you've got a fucked perspective on what personal property means if you're going to treat people like that and be hoarding and exploitative. That's not okay. You know, so whether that gets through to them or not, that's on them. But even being able to relay that to them of like, this is why we are seizing your shit. Here, we'll leave you 1 fucking acre for you and your family to live on and grow what you need. These other 99 are going to 99 other families.
yeah.
Because you don't have a right to just seize that much property and hoard.
And I think a good look is like what happened in Mexico after NAFTA was signed, like under Clinton's administration, and like the reason why we had so many people from Mexico migrate to the United States is that public land used to raise food for families to live on was privatized because NAFTA basically dictated that the Mexican government now had to privatize public land used and owned in common by the people for profit. And corporations basically were like, we're going to buy it because we can afford to buy it. And now people either had to adjust to the new labor model that was being thrust upon them, right? It's like, it's not your land, but you can still work it for a wage, or they had to just leave. And so where did they go? They came to the United States, and now we're like, oh, we need to keep these people out. And it's just like, the US is the reason they're here. It's like, we took their land from them. We sold it to companies like Nestle or Chase. And then like, now we're mad that those people have come here to find new lives. And it's like,
right.
Do you not understand like how that works? Like, do you understand the cause and effect of like stealing public land from people using it to live on, and then they would come to live here, you know?
Not to mention even like the factors of they're indigenous. This all is their land before it's
all Turtle Island,
able to be claimed by any fucking colonizer. This is Turtle Island. This is indigenous land, and Mexican people are indigenous people. So who the fuck are these conservative cunts to be basically trying to mask their racism behind capitalism, which is what they've done from the start? The two go hand in hand and feed each other.
Yep.
And trying to use it to justify stealing land yet the fuck again from its rightful owners.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and the Spanish brought that with them with the encomienda system, right? The idea that like class is based on shade of skin color, right? And the whiter you were, the higher you were on the encomienda like hierarchy. Until the revolution, you know, like that happened. And even then after the revolution, the revolutionary government caved and signed NAFTA. And so fucking over the indigenous people who lived in the south of Mexico. So, but now we have like the autonomous zone in Chiapas, right, as a result of that, and like the pressure that the people there felt, and the need to actually violently fight back against the government and win that struggle, and now have recognized independence, like, or autonomy from the government, which is still always under threat, because like, why would the government of Mexico is just like continue to allow this to exist? Because it acts as kind of as like a sign that like they're ineffectual, at dealing with popular movements. But it's just like
the government's been infiltrated by capitalism.
Right.
To a much less extent than ours, to be certain, but yeah.
But the effects are still there. And when you even have one person in leadership like that who's driven by greed, you have a fucking problem. It sets an example for others of like, see, look how much you can profit from exploiting like this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know? We really do need a global fucking revolution. We really do.
Yep.
Sooner than later. But anyway, dudes, it's after 10 o'clock, so I think I'm going to have to part ways with you guys.
That's totally fine. I was pretty much going to say that I didn't really have anything else and that I want to go eat dinner.
Yeah, probably good. The cook wants to eat. What is this?
Right?
I know, right?
Yeah, I've just been over here probably making you guys hungry, smashing on a delicious vegan dinner this whole time we're talking.
Oh no, I had food already, so I'm Gucci, baby. Gucci.
Speaking of vegan stuff, Emily made a vegan nacho cheese tonight, and the sample that I got is better than the stuff that I made.
Oh man, share the recipe.
Right? You got competition in the kitchen now.
For sure.
All right, guys. Well, it was a total pleasure talking to both of you, and look forward to more visits and more discussions in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Anytime you want to come back, if you have an idea of something you want to talk about, just message one of us and we'll make it happen.
Hell yeah.
Hell yes. That's what's
all right, guys.
Fuck it. Thank you for joining us again tonight.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Love,
appreciate it.
Solidarity.
Yeah, love, peace, and solidarity. All right, take care. All right, later, guys.
Later. So for the rest of you,
oh, never mind. Sorry, I didn't even think
hello.
About it. Lisa wanted to say hi.
I haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah, it has been the better part of a decade. It probably has been a decade. Shit, who am I kidding?
Yeah. Well,
almost.
When did Rev was? I didn't see you that day. Yeah, it was like 6 months before that. I think.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Been a hot minute. About 9 years, I'd say, not 10. Yeah.
Yeah, about that. Anyway, for the rest of the viewers, I just wanted to say Thursday we will be doing. I don't even remember what book it is. What book are we doing Thursday?
Are we doing Emma Goldman's Anarchism and Other Essays? I believe is up next.
I think so.
I think the last book club segment we recorded was Eldridge Cleavers, so it's time to give Emma a turn. I'm pretty sure.
Indeed. I can check on the podcast platforms, but I think you're right. I think it is Emma Goldman that's next. But that will be Thursday, same time, same channel.
Indeed.
What's next Tuesday? Will win.
Yes. I can't wait to see him again. He's fucking awesome.
For those of you that don't remember, Will Wynn is the Star Trek communist, and I'm not sure what specifically we'll be talking about this time, so I guess I can't really give you a rundown of that.
I'm drawing a blank now on the resources that he sent over to me.
Send those to the admin chat.
The need for a true revolutionary party of the working class. And I believe the other facet that he was wanting to discuss was the need for a global revolution. But don't quote me on it. I think my memory's kind of shit, but
what a dirty trust he is. I'm kidding. Yes. I'm kidding.
But yeah, those are important things to discuss because for fuck's sake, some shit's got to give. This capitalist exploitation pisses me off. It needs to end. Yes, I give you a nibble, princess. Give me doggy play.
All right. Well, I guess we can wrap this up now.
Right on. You gonna play the Flam Bam mix?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Where did I save it?
I don't know.
I don't feel as bad about interrupting.
Oh, our sign-offs are always awkward as fuck. That was perfect.
Yeah, they really are always awkward as fuck.
Yep. Intros and sign-offs always awkward.
Yeah.
Because it's us.
Where is... This is stupid. I thought I had it pulled up, but I guess not.
You just used it the other fucking day.
I know!
Where the fuck did it go?
I guess I'll just use the theme over then. Fuck it.
It should be in the same folder. You put them together so that you could...
I thought I did.
At least
I thought I did.
Look in your recents.
Hold on. I'm working on it.
I know. It's a work in progress. We'll get there eventually, people. You'll get to hear some cool shit. Some original music.
My guy. Make yourself comfortable. I'm gonna go rub some oils on him. He's all congested again.
Okay. Well, when you get done, come back out and we can pollute our lungs and cause some Mary Jane congestion. Yeah.
I found it. Oh my God.
Oh, before you go, do you want to hear this song?
Sure.
This one's an original.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I think you'll like how politically driven it is.
Take the fear and the bullseye. Walk from here to here. Where's the real goddamn night?
We've got to find freedom on this campus. And one. There's absolute freedom here. And we're all looking for freedom. Here's what I know.
Didn't matter when they sold the devil guns. Didn't matter when they played us drugs. Didn't matter when they stole your mother's son. Now everyone's out of their mind. Bullshit, these unemployment lines don't know the casuals to the corporate crimes. To the cover of a little one and don't know peace of mind. The only one that matter is the one who's more better than your grandkids here to joy. When you watch them, their reaction to every little inconvenience soul. Still a public, xenomorphous, threat to the status quo.
Reflections. We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.